All right, welcome back now from the State House. We have Massachusetts Massachusetts State Senator. You know what, Bruce? Let's start all over again.
Okay, Rick.
This ain't the first time this has happened to me. Massachusetts State Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr of Gloucester is with us again. And Senator, thank you for being so patient with me.
Well, Rick, thank you for being patient with me. We'd scheduled a different time to talk today, but things here at the State House overtook the that time slot, so we had to move. And I appreciate your patience and being able to accommodate me as well. So it goes both ways.
Well, apparently the topic today has to do with drugs or something like that. But before we get into that, it is the season. It's the wild season in Salem. There was a bit of a downer note over the weekend with two drunk driving arrests. I think those have been the first in Salem during the whole month of October, one involving some serious injury to a woman. But I guess for the gigantic crowds that they've had, things have gone well. And from what I've noticed, Senator, living in Gloucester and anecdotally discovering that many people who visit Salem end up going to the outer fringes afterwards. And they, for example, come into Gloucester, maybe to Beverly Danvers, that type of thing. And it's been quite a boost, I think, for the area. But I don't know. Do you have a chance to comment on that and what you've noticed?
Sure, Rick. Well, I am sorry to hear about the two drunk driving incidents, and those should never happen in our society, but they do happen. And the fact that it happened during Salem's Halloween celebration is unfortunate, but it shouldn't overshadow the fact that that celebration is an incredible economic driver for the entire North Shore. And from what I know of it, people come not only from all over Massachusetts, but from all over the country to come to Salem to celebrate Halloween. And when they do that, they naturally, if they have more time than just a day or two to spend, they venture out into some of the other incredible parts of the place where we live in Essex County and Middlesex County. And so it's great to see them do that. And again, this is a case of a rising tide lifts all ships. And when you bring that many people into the region, there's no doubt about it. They're going to want to see what's special about it. And there's plenty to see that is special.
Well, there's another Tarr family member who's getting involved this time of year, and it's beginning to build like a volcano. And that has to do with a weekend Halloween party for little kids. I've seen little kids all over the place dressed in costumes, and for many different venues, people just celebrating all over the place. It's been fun to watch.
Well, Rick, my brother Ringo never stops when it comes to community events. And he partnered with Mayor Verga and his wife Kelly and a pretty big team to produce an incredible Halloween party at Stage Fort Park that happened on Saturday. And I think you remember what the weather was like on Saturday. It was very, very warm. They had a turnout that was estimated somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people. There were hay rides, there was free pizza. I'm told there was 200 pounds of candy. But interestingly enough, Rick, competing with the candy very favorably was the food truck from the Open Door Food Pantry, which had fresh fruit.
Nice.
And by the time I got to the Halloween party, the fruit was all pretty much gone. So that's very interesting to see that, sure, there was a place for candy, but fruit and fresh vegetables also taking their rightful place in that event.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, where do they put the flags? The Tarr brothers put flags all over the boulevard on Memorial Day, and then they take them down Labor Day. And where do they go?
So usually they come back to our farm, but this year they went to the Veterans Center in Gloucester because the Veterans Center and the veterans organizations in Gloucester are going to play a larger role going forward in helping to put the flags out. So they're being stored there over the winter and into the spring. They'll be restored and made ready for deployment when the weather once again gets warm. And Ringo and his team, including some additional veterans, will be out there, and maybe some other organizations too. We'll hold that news for the future, but some other organizations too will be out there in a team effort. But the flags are well secured right now. They're stored, they're being cared for, and they'll be ready to go again in the spring.
I love promoting what Ringo and your family does, because I don't think you can ever get enough credit or too much credit for it. And it's a boon to the community. And I know that this time of year, something up north starts happening, and we'll talk about that, I presume, in the next visit.
Well, Rick, we certainly should, because I have some news from our sister city of Shelburne, and we'll do what I think is called in the radio and television business a tease. I will let
Okay.
you know that I have some important news about that, and maybe we could talk about it the next time we convene in this electronic format.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. All right, now down to business, Senator. You're working, as always, on bills that are directed to benefit the citizens of Massachusetts. And what's up now?
So we had two bills geared toward promoting public health, Rick, that we took up last Thursday in the formal session of the Senate. Two bills that I was proud to support. One of them had to do with allowing pharmacists to prescribe drugs that prevent the transmission of HIV. They're commonly known as PrEP. And you could only get those, and you still can only get those because this hasn't become law yet, but you can only get those through a doctor's prescription. But yet it's incredibly important to have them accessible in a timely fashion. And so the bill that we did would allow pharmacists to be able to do those prescriptions and distribute those medications at the pharmacy within some restrictions in terms of providing counseling and referral to a primary care physician. So within some safeguards, but I think it's very important to make those drugs available in a timely fashion. And similarly, Rick, the second bill is one that I think we should have done a long time ago. And I'm glad we're moving on it now. And I hope the House and the governor will agree and we can get this bill signed. It has to do with making menstrual products available free of charge at institutions like homeless shelters, certainly in our jails, but also to make them available subject to appropriation in our schools for students that need them. And Rick, I told you we would talk a little bit about that special language, subject to appropriation. And it's the legislature's way of saying to our schools, you must do this if we fund it. And that's the way we prevent that from becoming an unfunded mandate. So there's a directive there from the state, but it only becomes operative if we put money in the budget to support the schools in that mission. And I, for one, am hoping we'll do that, and we'll be working to make sure that we do that.
Editorially, and sometimes I do editorialize when talking with you, which I don't usually do when interviewing public officials. But as a former teacher, Senator, getting that help into the schools, there are so many young women that I've worked with who have had a difficult time or got embarrassed for one reason or another, for various reasons. And that's not taking anything away from school nurses who are wonderful. But I think anything that's extra to help these young kids is way cool. So what's the next step in the process?
So the next step is the bill will move on to the House. We hope that they'll approve it. And if they approve it without any differences from what we've done, then it will go to the governor's desk. If there are differences, it may go to a conference committee, or it may be subject to some back and forth between the House and the Senate. But the important thing, Rick, is that this is a bill, as I mentioned, whose time has come. It's very straightforward. It's very basic. It will make a huge difference in the lives of a lot of the folks that need these products. And no one should be in a situation of needing a menstrual product and not being able to get it in a homeless shelter or in school or in the place where they need it. And so these have a way to go, both of these bills, Rick, but I have a feeling that they have some good momentum behind them, and I'm going to work to do what I can to make sure they get all the way to the governor's desk.
Going back to the HIV prevention drugs, I'm just wondering the process that it takes to legalize or whatever the correct term is, something like that, to make it available to those who want to use it, sort of almost like an OTC availability versus the process you have to go through getting a prescription. That seems like it's pretty involved.
Well, the key word there is almost like over the counter, Rick, because it's not quite. And so what we're essentially doing is conveying to the pharmacist the authority that right now only the doctor has. And as I mentioned, that comes with some restrictions in terms of counseling, perhaps even HIV testing, and a whole regimen of things. And one of the amendments that I offered to the bill, which I ultimately withdrew because I'm hoping we're going to find another way to achieve this objective, would make sure that pharmacists are properly compensated. If you go to a doctor, the doctor is compensated for that office visit or whatever leads up to writing the prescription. In this bill, we're asking the pharmacist to do those things, but without additional compensation. And in the course of the debate on the Senate floor, it became apparent that we need to do this not only for this class of drugs, but for other things that pharmacists are doing that they're not being properly compensated for. So I withdrew the amendment. We've got a larger bill coming around pharmacy issues, and I'm going to try to address it in that bill. So number one, yes, there is more to it than it just being an over-the-counter kind of process. There are a lot of protections around this and a lot of activities that need to happen to make sure that the drugs are properly prescribed. But in the end, it's important to make sure that when someone presents at a pharmacy, if they're eligible to get these drugs, they can get them in a timely way.
You brought up one more issue that I want to ask you about that may not be in your purview, and you talked about pharmacists doing more without being compensated in a sense. And I know that when I went to get my vaccines and my boosters and my flu shots, I used to have to go to the doctor for that, or the doctor's office, and that's all changed. There are these clinics that are set up, but now they're available at a pharmacy. And is that something that pharmacists, is that part of this deal on something extra that they have to do, or is that way outside because that's federal government stuff?
Well, oftentimes they are compensated for delivering those injections. And so it actually is moving us in the right direction. There are a lot of us think that empowering pharmacists to do more, if it's within their capability, actually reduces costs to our healthcare system. As you mentioned, you didn't have to go to the doctor for that, so it comes at a reduced cost. However, we need to make sure that if we want pharmacists to perform these essential functions and save money for the system, they do get compensated properly. Maybe not as much as a doctor would, but still compensated so that they can continue to provide those functions. And Rick, it's where I see us moving with the decentralization of healthcare in some ways, of pharmacists performing these additional functions. And as we go there, we have to keep a couple of things in mind. One is we need to make sure that it's sustainable, and so that they get fairly compensated. And two, that it's safe, and that we have appropriate safeguards around that additional activity for the pharmacists.
This seems like a big result of COVID, and it seems almost revolutionary because, as you say, it's moving away. It's moving outwards so that there's more coverage and more people can afford it, I guess.
No doubt about it. It is decentralizing some basic healthcare functions, and it's putting them into the hands of people that are qualified to perform them. But again, we have to be careful, and we have to make sure we think these things through and make sure that they won't have an adverse consequence for our public health system. But there are many instances where that won't be the case, and this will help to move us forward.